Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Today is the October 3rd, 2023 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. I am going to start, as we usually do, with a poetry reading. We have a special guest with us tonight to read for us, thanks to our poet laureate, and our guest's name is Guadalupe Luna. Welcome. Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Guadalupe Luna Rojas. I am Cedar Ridge Youth Poet Laureate. And today I have a poem based on my personal experiences as a Latina student and being in school and everything. This is my personal experiences and how it contributed to my childhood. ¿Entiendes? This is dedicated to Estrella and the other children at the elementary school where I volunteered, who don't always understand their worth, their capabilities, their value, and my parents who have sacrificed everything for me and my sisters for better opportunities. Nadie entiende mis lenguas, mis raíces. Nadie entiende lo que verdaderamente se significa el viaje de la mejor oportunidad. How the story itself is not quite enough for your head to begin to grasp. The thirst, the pain, the hunger, the worry, the loneliness, the uncertainty of questioning yourself. Did you make the right choice? Going towards the complete unknown of everything foreign. Because you don't understand me and I don't understand you, I came to learn that my food is loved here because it tastes so different. I'm different because my hair is dark, my tongue is sharp and often silent, my skin is a caramel brown and quite different from the beautiful fair because as a kid I thought it wasn't fair how the girls at school had beautiful golden locks. And being in the sun in the summer going for a tan was so because they did the most to gain the golden touch, but then why was my natural caramel brown hated so much? Somewhere an 8-year-old girl sits in a math classroom confused because math is already hard enough. Much more so if it's in a language where you don't understand. But she is smart and beautiful and more than the barriers, more than the ignorant comments and hateful names. More than because little 8-year-old me with bushy eyebrows, hairy arms, and crooked teeth believed the hateful lies and names when their ignorance shouldn't have had any importance to me. There will always be that one kid in class that loves tacos, but always loves to mispronounce your name too. Because it's not Angelina, it's Angeline. Because it's not Mary, it's Maritza. Because it's not Marcus, it's Marcos. No te conformes con quedarte callado. Don't settle for just staying quiet and letting everything sink in. Don't let them silence you. Don't let the things they say define you. They can't design you. You'll learn to embrace the other part of you hated so much.
Yes.
So much for having me.
All of that.
Thank you for being here, and thank you to your family as well. They're all here in the audience. Right, I have a couple of proclamations to share tonight. But first, just want to note that our town manager, Richard White, is obviously not here this evening, so filling in as our assistant town manager, Marie Parker. Thanks for being here tonight, Marie. All right. Proclamation I'm going to read is for Walk and Roll to School Day. So I don't know if there's anyone from staff who wants to be up here for that, but especially if we have details about, I have details from town clerk about the event for next Wednesday, so I'll take care of that. All right, whereas the 27th Annual National Walk and Roll to School Day will be celebrated on October 4th, 2023, and communities across the United States will celebrate on various days in October, including Carrboro on Wednesday, October 11th. That's next Wednesday. Whereas communities participate in Walk and Roll to School Day to encourage all forms of active transportation to school and to inspire local action to create habits, policies, and environments that support students walking to and from school. And whereas teaching children to walk, roll, or bike to school safely can help create lifelong travel habits and offer opportunities for students to incorporate physical activity into their daily routines, which is associated with improved academic performance. And whereas enabling and encouraging more students to walk, roll, or bike to school safely benefits the whole community by creating safer streets, reducing traffic congestion, improving accessibility, fostering a stronger sense of community, lowering household transportation costs, and improving the health of the environment. And whereas the town's 2020 updated bicycle transportation plan recommends implementing the Safe Routes to School Action Plan, which strives to increase the number of students walking and rolling to school, to encourage active lifestyles and to improve traffic safety. And the town's 2020 Community Climate Action Plan recommends accelerating efforts to support the Safe Routes to School program, including coordination with Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools. And whereas the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education endorsed the Carrboro Safe Routes to School Action Plan, and the Town Council has reestablished the town's Safe Routes to School Implementation Committee to lead implementation of the plan and coordinate efforts between the town and Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools. And whereas the mayor and other members of the town council will lead Carrboro's Walk and Roll to School Day events on October 11th by walking with students from Wilson Park to Carrboro Elementary School. And whereas the town is working with McDougal Elementary School, McDougal Middle School, and Morris Grove Elementary School to count students on Walk and Roll to School Day. Now, therefore, I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, to be Walk and Roll to School Day. Sorry, I'm wearing the wrong glasses again and tripping up over my words. In Carrboro, I encourage all students in Carrboro who are able to do so safely to walk, roll, or take the bus to school on this day and to consider doing so as often as possible during the school year. This is the third day of October, 2023. All right, so Trish is the director of the town's planning department. Thank you for being here today, Trish. And Trish's staff has been organizing our Walk to School Day events as they always do. And what we're going to do, as we usually do on Walk and Roll to School Day, is next Wednesday, October 11th, meet at Wilson Park between, get this, 7 a.m. and 7:15 a.m. so that we'll have time to take a group photo and begin walking at about 7:20 a.m. And get to Carrboro Elementary School on time for class. So come to Wilson Park before 7:20 a.m. if you want to be in the photo and take a walk with us to school. All right. Thank you, Trish.
You're welcome. Thank you. Look forward to it.
Next proclamation is a proclamation for Fire Prevention Week, and I know that Chief Potter has a number of his staff here to join us at the front. As many as would like to join us. Welcome, Chief. Hey, guys. Is this the whole shift? Or? Hopefully somebody's on call. Yeah. Okay, this is a proclamation for Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the Carrboro Fire Rescue Department's core mission includes protecting lives, property, and the community from the destructive effects of all hazards, and whereas Carrboro Fire Rescue uses a multifaceted community risk reduction model to achieve this mission, which includes education, engineering, fire code enforcement, economic incentives, and emergency response. And whereas Carrboro Fire Rescue's 36 first responders responded to 1,955 calls for service in fiscal year 2023, and whereas Carrboro Fire Rescue has had one promotion to the rank of battalion chief, one promotion to the rank of captain, and one promotion to the rank of driver in the past year. 3 employees have completed the fire officer certification, and 9 employees have completed the driver operator certification. And whereas also in fiscal year 2023, Carrboro Fire Rescue added a new engine to the fleet that is designed to better serve our community. I think many of us have seen it rolling around town, nice and shiny one. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire, and whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in home fires in half, and people who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan are more prepared and more likely to survive a fire. And whereas the National Fire Prevention Association has designated October 8th to 14th, 2023 as Fire Prevention Week, an annual observance now in its 101st year. And whereas Carrboro Fire Rescue's first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. Now, therefore, I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim October 8th to 14th, 2023 to be Fire Prevention Week in Carrboro. I encourage all residents to ensure everyone in their home understands the sounds of the smoke alarms and knows how to respond, to make a home fire escape plan, and to ensure their smoke alarms are working and meet the needs of all family members, including those with sensory or physical disabilities. I also encourage residents to share their appreciation for Carrboro Fire Rescue's dedicated first responders and to learn more about the community risk reduction services the department provides. this the third day of October 2023. Welcome, Chief. I'm hoping you're going to tell us a little bit about Fire Prevention Week.
Talk a little bit. Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First off, I wanted to express our appreciation for the Council always being willing to support our efforts in fire prevention. We really take that seriously, and I was talking a little bit before this that for a small town, we do quite a bit. We have a number of programs that are aimed to help people be safer in a fire. One of those programs, as you were mentioning, is smoke alarms. And so, oddly enough, we're almost in Fire Prevention Week. We got somebody came to the station on Monday, and they had we installed smoke alarms in 2020 as part of one of our smoke alarm canvases that you all graciously supported. And they had a fire on early Monday morning. They improperly discarded smoking material, set off the smoke alarm, alerted a resident. They were able to take that outside. If it were not for that, it was not for your dedication to that, if it was not for our personnel's dedication to fire prevention, that could have had a much different outcome. So really appreciate the support there and the support of our personnel. And this year, the theme for Fire Prevention Week is cooking fire safety starts with you. And so the number one cause of residential home fires, the number one cause of injury and death in the civilian population is cooking fires. So this year we want to especially make sure that people have smoke alarms and that they cook safely. The highest occurrence of those fires is around the holidays. And so as we start to get into the holiday season, please make sure that you're cooking safely, that you're attending your cooking, that you have working smoke alarms and a fire extinguisher in close proximity. So thank you again for all the support, and we're looking forward to some educational activities next week. We've got quite a few events lined up with local elementary schools and other places in the community. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Chief. And this is for you. Thank you. Before y'all go back to your seats or back to work, maybe, I'm not sure where you're going. I'm guessing you're not going to sit through the whole meeting tonight, but you're welcome to. I just wanted to note that this past weekend we had the Carrboro Music Festival, and it was incredibly successful, probably one of the best ones I can remember in the time that I've been going to the music festival. And some of the folks who were out on the streets for the town that day were members of the Carrboro Fire Rescue Department, keeping folks safe. There were some potentially overcapacity crowds at some venues on certain occasions, and it was these guys as well as folks from Recreation and Parks and from our police department who were keeping folks safely away from the streets, keeping access to the buildings open and free of obstruction. And I just want to appreciate you all for being out there and making that a great day. So thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Randy, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell had a couple comments to make. Go ahead, Randy.
I want to thank you, and I want to thank the department, both stations. I mean, this fire prevention is a really important issue for me and my family, and I've watched you guys in action. I just wanted to point out to the community three things. I'm really glad in the proclamation mentioned about creating a plan and know the plan, critical. Practice the plan. Children really are highly responsive to knowing what the plan is, and it makes all the difference. So three things. One, I'm going to encourage folks in the community to get in touch with the fire department and get the blue address signs, because they do help fire folk find the right address quickly. Second, the CO2, the CO monitors, carbon monoxide, in addition to the smoke detectors, are really important. And thirdly, this is the time of year, do it now. Clean those chimneys now. Really important, as we know in Carrboro. So thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting us.
Okay. I have a couple people signed up to speak. One is for an item that's later on the agenda. The other is for an item that's not on the agenda, and that is Bob Proctor. So Bob, come on up. Oh, you're right. Don't come up quite yet, Bob. I'm jumping ahead of myself. You'll hold on one sec. I forgot to get to announcement of upcoming meetings, Mr. Clerk.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Got a few meeting announcements here. First up, tomorrow, October 4th, we have a climate action team meeting. That will be at 7 p.m. Via Zoom. Next, October 5th, we have the Appearance Commission meeting. That'll be held at 6:30 p.m. and that'll be also on Zoom. Also on October 5th, the Northern Transition Area Advisory Committee meeting at 6:30 p.m. on Zoom. October 5th, Environmental Advisory Board meeting at 7:30 p.m. on Zoom. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, we're continuing October 5th. Planning Board meeting and the Joint Advisory Board meeting will be October 5th at 7:30 p.m. That's going to be held virtually on Zoom. And then the Transportation Advisory Board meeting also on October 5th at 7:30 p.m., which is part of the Joint Advisory Board meeting, be held virtually. And then next week we have the Recreation and Parks Commission meeting at 7 p.m. at the Carrboro Century Center. And our next Town Council meeting, which will be a work session, will be next Tuesday, October 10th at 7 p.m. And all of the Zoom links are online at our carrboro.nc.gov. Just go to the calendar and you can find the Zoom links there for each of the meetings.
Thanks so much, Wesley. I wanted to mention there's an event happening at Weaver Street Market on the lawn, or the patio, I guess, that's, I believe, being co-sponsored in some way by the town. And so I just wanted to mention it. It's an annual event that's been going on for at least a couple years now, and it's called Africa Fest. And it's organized by folks at the university as well as folks in the community. And going to be, I wish I had thought to pull up all the information about it, but there should be some promotion going on about it online. If you look up on the town's website, Africa Fest, that'll be at Weaver Street Market this coming Sunday, October 8th. Any other meetings to announce, Randy?
Yeah, I just want to announce that our former Triangle J Council of Governments is rebranded. And so when I announce their meetings, it's the Central Pines Regional Council. It is Triangle J's new name, and so that it's more encompassing and evocative of the entire region.
Thank you, Randy. I had Susan next.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention that the Local Government Affordable Housing Collaborative was scheduled to meet last evening, and that meeting was canceled. And we are rescheduling for later in the month. And Wesley, I'll let you know when we get that date on the calendar. And one more event I wanted to just share is the Carrboro 10K Road Race is this Saturday, 8 a.m., McDougal Middle School. I think it starts right there in front of the school and then finishes up on the track, 8 a.m., fun way to start the day, so come on out.
Any other meetings to announce? All right, now we'll go on to the public comment period. As I mentioned, we have one person to sign up, and that is Bob Proctor. Bob, welcome.
Hello. Hopefully this will be the last time this year.
You know the routine, Bob. As you know, we ask folks to keep their comments to no more than 3 minutes, and I'll set a little timer here to keep me on track.
What will happen to the Westwood green space? In June, we thought half the vacant land would be preserved forever, but only 1/3 will be kept for now. So we'd like your sentiments regarding permanent preservation to be in the record. Your approval of the master plan mentioned undeveloped green space, but didn't say how much or how long. The consultant said the plan would evolve, that the fence could be moved to run along the sidewalk. Your resolution referred to phased implementation dictated by demand for plots. After Chapel Hill stopped, Westwoods sold 75 a year. The promised 600 will last only 8 years. Then nothing will be different. Some will want graves in the green space. You've listened to dozens speak, you've heard staff presentations, and discussed this. Some of you and many citizens found this painful. We found collecting 473 signatures exhausting. You've said you shouldn't burden future councils. It seemed to me that you all reached a consensus that the space should endure, but there's no record of that. Your consensus will be forgotten. One of you texted me that nothing beyond those 2 words was needed. So I took a screenshot of that text to save for the year 2030. Better, for the video record, here's what I've heard here, or I've been told. 2 of you wanted to preserve all of it forever. Of the other 5, 1 of you introduced in perpetuity when meeting with me. The other moderate sent me a text. That text. A third always spoke for providing for use by folks not in Westwood families. A fourth promised me and Alex, that Lanza, that some space would be left open. The fifth never questioned the value of open space when speaking. After the attorney was asked about in perpetuity in June, he said this council can't prevent changes, but none of you objected to the sentiments for permanent preservation. Tape is rolling. What do you have to say to the 2030 council? I already know they can change if they want. What have you told me? What were your sentiments in June and last month? Have I misrepresented any of your 2023 sentiments? You all have microphones. Both sides deserve to hear a few words from each of you.
Thanks for your comments, Bob. So, Madam Manager, and Bob, we're not going to get into a dialogue with you about this, but I will just confirm with the manager that we adopted a resolution that accompanied the master plan for the cemetery property. It did specify undeveloped green space along with all of the other uses of the property, and none of those uses did it specify square footages or any of those other details you mentioned, but it does show on the master plan the undeveloped green space, and I believe it is the sentiment of this council, as was expressed in that resolution, that the undeveloped green space on the property is part of the master plan for the property. So I don't know that there's any need to clarify beyond that any more than we've already done in the resolution and in the master plan that accompanied that resolution. But I appreciate your comments. If there are council members who want to bring this back on a future meeting to offer further clarification, I guess we can talk to the manager about doing that. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the matter's been decided, and it includes undeveloped green space.
I wasn't asking for a dialogue. I was asking for one sentence apiece.
I've offered you a response. Thank you.
And I'm not accepting your response.
Okay.
Both sides put a hell of a lot of energy and emotion into this for months. You're just kicking the can down the road for 7 years.
Thanks for being here, Bob. Sammy.
Yeah, I share the concern that Bob mentioned. It was very clear by some of the comments that it was ambiguous to the extent that a lot of people still consider this being cemetery space, which by default means undeveloped, could potentially be developed. So I feel it is unfortunate that we weren't clear one way or another, that the words are ambiguous. And I do feel like, we came very close to running out of cemetery space, and that eventually, not that long from now, a council will have to grapple with this question again. And it would have been nice to find a permanent solution that would resolve this issue for both sides now.
Thank you, Sammy.
I'm
want
sorry.
to avoid us getting into this again, but Barbara, go
This is
ahead.
for clarity
Sure.
about the undeveloped space. And so, am I correct that the undeveloped portion, or the greens, undeveloped portion of Westwood Cemetery, which is also, green space, it can't be used for burial?
Right, we adopted a master plan,
So it's not likely
and the resolution
that,
specified that one of the things on the master plan is undeveloped green space.
that's all for me.
I don't know how to be more specific.
And that was my understanding. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for being here, Bob.
Well, I mean, we had that understanding at our work session that you couldn't expand, and then there was a consultant that brought to light that it could be. So in the future, that could also happen again.
That is true, but I mean, all this council can say is that we adopted a master plan. And accompanying that master plan was a resolution that expressed the sentiment of the council about the use of space. That's laid out on the drawing of the master plan. I can't control what a future council does, right? But that, I think, is a clear expression of the sentiment of this council when we adopted that resolution.
Right, and some of us feel it's very ambiguous and leaves things very open-ended, and that's what some people would like to get more firmness about. So I value that, and to whatever extent we could, I would be looking forward to us doing it. Being clear about like making that permanently undeveloped open space.
I'm not sure how to do that. Okay, but we can talk about it, whether that needs to
I
have
mean, one
additional
very clear way
clarity.
would be to subdivide it and say this is permanent. This isn't cemetery space. Because one of the issues we saw is that this is still called cemetery space, and you know, by 2030, people will say, well, this is cemetery space that was set aside, you know, in whatever date.
Well, but that's not what the resolution that this council adopted is, and that's what is the
That's
law.
why yeah, and that's why it would behoove us to be clear.
Okay. The ambiguity you're describing is not present in the resolution we adopted. That's what I'm saying. So I understand that there were people, public speakers, others who made comments about the issue. Council adopted a resolution and a master plan. That resolution is clear. I don't agree, and that's just a difference of opinion, I guess. Respectfully disagree. I think if this is something that council feels like needs to be addressed further, we need to do it at a future meeting when it's on an agenda.
Yeah, I agree.
I just had a small question. So the consultant is the one who talked about expansion, not us. So I think that that's what needs to be clarified. And I would support, you know, having a short discussion about this just to get that clarified. Soon.
So do we need a motion to direct the manager to bring this back so we could clarify that at this point? If so,
I think we'll have to be clear about what you need clarification on.
So we would like to have not a work session, a regular meeting for the council to make a decision on the degree to which the undeveloped green space is permanent or not. That's my motion.
I'll second, although I probably would have stated it a little differently, but I'll second that.
All right, there's a motion to come back to council, for the manager to come back to council with some options for clarifying the intent behind the undeveloped green space on the master plan. Is that a fair summary of your motion, Tammy?
Thank you.
Randy has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion?
I have just one question, Mayor. So I assume this would be something that we would need to bring before council while this same group, before just November.
No, not necessarily. I mean, it can, but it's not necessarily, though. The council is the council, whoever's sitting on it.
I'm just wondering, in terms of this council's intentions around that resolution, does that
I mean, it sounds to me like something that can be pretty easily resolved.
me too?
I thought it had been resolved, but we can bring it back and I'll talk to the town manager about
Okay.
doing that. Eleazar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be voting against this motion because I believe the resolution is clear. Continuing to have these prolonged conversations after it's been a matter that has been settled, after there's been a pretty harsh debate, and many people in the community know that this is settled. It's opening up more. It's unnecessary. The resolution is clear, and I'm going to urge my colleagues to vote against this.
Oh, go ahead with the vote. I mean, I would,
There's a motion by Sammy, a second by Randy. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
nay.
Susan, I didn't hear what your vote was.
Aye.
So the motion passes 4-3, I believe. Is that correct? Okay. With
I could not be more disappointed. The resolution is super clear. Nothing can even be done in that portion of Westwood.
My vote just reflects that I think this is a good faith.
Easy
I
to,
think it's
easy
important
to resolve.
The
So let's move on.
resolution is
Yeah.
clear.
All right.
Opens up again.
I will work with the town manager or the assistant town manager to make sure that that it's clear in what comes back to council, so we don't have to spend, as Eleazar said, more time talking about this issue.
And if we could have the specifics that came from the consultant that didn't necessarily come from the council.
Well, this
all
is
we need
where
is what came
we're-
from the council. We're not getting into the consultant. Okay, I've got direction from the council. I'll talk to the manager about it, and we'll move on. All right. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Madam Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. The first item is the approval of minutes for February 7th, 2023. And the second item is a resolution authorizing the town manager to execute a contract for executive search firm services. The purpose of this item is to authorize the town manager to negotiate and execute a contract addendum for executive search firm services to fill the position of town clerk.
Madam Manager, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I just want to pull the minutes because I did send a late amendment. I want to make sure everyone got it. And but for the public, I guess it's just a clarification on what my request was for the quarterly police report. Do I need to read it, or is that sufficient summary?
So the amendment that you offered is
I think the email.
just reading. I'm just seeing the email for the first time. Councilmember Slade requested the report show a side-by-side comparison of a pie chart demographics of drivers in Carrboro based on residency tracking to pie chart of total stops per race and ethnicity. Councilmember Slade also requested timeline of data to show if effects happen from pre-stops policy to post-stops policy. Any concern about that amendment to these minutes?
With that amendment, I'll move the minutes.
Just move the whole agenda.
Or, yeah, the whole consent.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Sammy, seconded by Susan. We adopt the consent agenda with the amendments noted to the minutes for February 7th. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Thanks for that, Sammy.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is other matters. Madam Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is the Police Department Quarterly Equity Report. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide council with an overview of the quarterly Police Department Equity Report for the fourth quarter of 2022 and the first quarter of 2023. Chief ATAC from the Police Department will be presenting on this item.
Thank you, Marie. Welcome, Chief ATAC.
I'm trying not to lean over here, so I'm stooping. Good evening. So tonight I'm going to wander from this. Let me see how I can do this. Tonight we're covering two quarters, which would be the last quarter of 2022 and the first quarter of 2023. Just to give you some background, we lost our data analyst in February, and it took a few months to fill that position, and then we had to recreate the report. So it's a work in progress. So again, we've already gotten some feedback, so thank you. We'll get it right. So these are for these two quarters. In 2020, the council set some policy goals for public safety and racial equity resolution in, I believe, June of 2020, and that we're dealing with ethnic and racial disparities when it came to motor vehicle stops, searches, citations, uses of force, and low-level marijuana offenses. Also in that resolution was a request to continue. I don't remember if we stopped, maybe. Anyway, if we did, to continue in quarterly report with this information in it. And that is what we're going to be going through this evening. So this first is the first quarter, or excuse me, it's the last quarter of it's quarter 4 of 2022, sorry. Two metrics here. On the left, we have demographic of drivers related to crashes, and then we have Carrboro census demographics on the right. I think I noted it in the racial equity, sorry, during the racial equity questions that the composite population was not made for this report because we were quickly trying to get this in for the original June meeting. It will be in the next quarter's report as part of this. So total stops for quarter 4, we have 349 stops. We have the racial breakdown on the left as a percentage, and then we have the total numerics on the right. Stops by type, these are the state form classification. So we have in quarter 4, roughly 74% have a correlation with speed or safety. That's going to be speeding, operating a vehicle unsafely, along those lines. And then we have additional down, it looks like 9% was registration, 6% was equipment, 7% was investigative, and then 4% was other. Other was a question, I'll cover that in a minute. That was one of the questions from February, what an other stop is, so I'll clarify that. This is our traffic stop policy. This has been in effect since quarter 1 of 2022, or in common speak, January 1st, 2022. So this was something that we developed to address concerns about racial equity with traffic enforcement. The basis of this was Governor Cooper's Task Force on Racial Equity and Law Enforcement's model policy for motor vehicle traffic enforcement. There were some tweaks to it. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here. But it specifically had a focus on safety and moving violations, as well as was designed to address some concerns about equipment and others. So specifically listed within the policy are these violations to focus on. Most of them are going to be related to the safe operation of a vehicle, whether the driver is impaired or whether the operation of the motor vehicle is a concern.
Sorry, Chief, you said it, but I didn't catch it. Quarter 1 of 2022 or 2020 was when that
January
policy-
1st, 2022. So quarter, yeah, it started, yeah, the first day of the first quarter of 2022.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. When it specifically addressed regulatory and equipment enforcement, specifically within the policy, it prohibited stops based upon the following list, and unless a safety threat is present, right? I wanted to have the officers, if there was a safety threat, I did not want to say, leave it alone because it's, we want to make sure we're keeping folks safe. Specific concerns that have been raised in the past: license plate lights, defective or improper equipment, a brake light not working, exhaust system noise, of course, unless it violates the town noise ordinance, window tint, expired registration, and inspection, both without or expired. Specifically allowed was a no license plate or improper display. That was in there specifically, and as we pull the data for last year and this year, our auto thefts are up 80%, 80%, sorry. I don't know what's going on with my voice today. So that was specifically so that it allowed for that to be aware of what's going on with vehicles. Also in the policy was a compliance review that is tasked within internal to pull citations, warnings, check adherence to policy requirements as well. That is online, as are all our policies. If you go to the Town of Carrboro's police page, all those policies are available. If you can't sleep tonight, I recommend you read them all. Stop type by demographics for quarter 4 2022. So here we have, to the left, we have a bar chart showing the different types of stops, and then to the right, we have the actual numerics for the stops. Enforcement action for, I'm sorry, did you have a question? I'm sorry. Enforcement action by demographic. So here we have on the chart to the left, we have warnings, arrests, and citations. And then on the right, we actually have the numbers relative to those. So roughly 40% of traffic stops resulted in a citation. I mean, 60% were a written or verbal warning. Stop types leading to enforcement, this is a citation or an arrest, are listed here on the left. We have registration, speed or safety, equipment, other, and investigative. And then to the right, we also have the numbers. So in this case, the way you read this chart, you say of all the stops for registration, this percent resulted in a citation or an arrest. That's how it's read. 72% of our stops in this quarter came from that speed or safety category. 16% were registration and equipment. Searches for quarter 4. We have 2 consent searches, and then we have the incident to arrest, which is the blue bar, and then the dark gray, I guess, is the probable cause search, and then the numerics off to the right. So in this case, we had a 72% found rate on probable cause searches. Basically what that means, when you have a 72% find rate, generally the state average is probably somewhere in the neighborhood. I believe it's 45%. So if you see a search rate or a success rate that's lower than that, the concept is phishing, right? You've got officers that are phishing. We have a 10% hit rate. We're searching a lot of cars on the off chance of catching a few things. But when you have a higher found rate, in this case for 72% for the quarter, officers are making good searches based upon strong probable cause.
Chief, the 72%, is that represented in either of these 2 graphs? Or is
So the find rate listed by the analyst is 72%. It is not. I guess you'd have to do math on that.
Okay.
If you need clarification on that, I can tell you how he figures that out. But I think what we do is he takes total, sorry if I'm not in the mic, if he takes the total amount of searches and then the total amount that there are actually things found. Now, sometimes you can have one search that finds 2 things, and so that can sometimes, but what he does is he breaks it down and gets you that 72%. So basically 7 out of 10 on the probable cause side results in some sort of contraband, and that's that listed here on the right.
Thank you.
There were 2 misdemeanor possessions of marijuana for the entire quarter. One was in conjunction with carrying an illegal gun. The other was as a result of a domestic assault. So there were charges that were added on with a more serious charge. That is the end of...
Chief, just to clarify
Yes,
for
sir.
folks who are listening, the reason that what you just said is important is that there was this sort of policy goal established around minimizing the sort of prioritization of marijuana-related arrests, right? And so this is what you're basically telling us is, to the extent that there were any arrests related to marijuana, it was in conjunction with another more serious crime.
Correct, and it was 2. And so usually that's,
2,
yeah,
right.
we've been consistent for a while with that, where standalone, then we will just have the person destroy it and just be like, hey, come on. And we just have that conversation. But yes, those 2 charges did result as a result of a more serious arrest, and were found during a search incident to arrest or something. Yes, thank you. This is just a refresh of the 2 metrics earlier, just because we're about to jump into quarter 1, 2023. So total stops for quarter 1, we had 311 stops. Percent breakdown from racial pie chart on the left, as well as numerics on the right. Stop by type, again, we see 73% are speed or safety related. So this includes speedings, DWI stops, stoplights, stop signs, etc. So that was, I think he said 73%. No, I'm sorry. I'll get you 73% for speed and safety for that quarter. Demographic for quarter 1, again, we have the bar chart on the left showing the reasons for the stops and the demographic breakdowns with numbers on the right. This is enforcement action. Quarter 1, again, we have the bar chart with dark gray is warnings, the blue is arrest, and the green, or I guess that's light green. There's a fancy word, I'm sure, but I can't think it's green. Citation. So we had a lot of the arrests were a result of a traffic stop where then someone had a warrant unrelated to the reason for this traffic stop, but when we run someone's driver's license, it now will pop up and say they have a warrant. And most of those people with warrants were not from Carrboro. Stop type leading to enforcement, citation, arrest. So again, how you read this is, of all the stops related to registration, 70, 56, and 71% led to a citation or an arrest. And that's how you read that. And we have the numerics on the right. Searches for quarter 1, no consent searches. And then we have, again, the blue is the incident to arrest, which is an automatic search. It's called low discretion. So when an officer takes someone into custody, they search them. That is an automatic safety search. And then the probable cause, which is the darker gray, and then the numerics on the right. We had a 55% overall found rate on PC searches, so a little bit lower than the other quarter, but still above what is considered the 45% metric. So again, not in the phishing range. Lower, but not in the range. 29 pieces of contraband were found on 29 searches. Some multiple items were located in 2 searches. So overall success rate on PC searches, probable cause searches is 68%, not 55%, is 68%, again, and no consent searches for this quarter. So these are trends.
Right. Can you repeat the probable cause rate?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that was off of this one. So the overall success rate or find rate for probable cause searches for this quarter is 68%. Yep. So these are some of the trends. On the left, you have going back to Q1 2020 or January 1st, 2020 through the first quarter, going up here through the end of the first quarter. And on the right, we just have the numeric number of stops. So if you look at the number of stops, we're less than 50% of the stops that we were at back in 2021. So we've had a significant drop off, over 50% since that time.
That's as a result of the traffic stop policy.
I think there's going to be a number of factors in there, one of which is going to be staffing stability. We've had a lot of turnover, a lot of openings, so that's going to play into it. But this policy wasn't kicked in until Q1 2022. So that drop was a year prior to the actual policy being kicked in. So I think there's not necessarily a correlation there. It just happened a year prior to the policy kicking in. That makes sense?
Chief, do we know why it dropped in a year before? You said staffing, maybe?
No, honestly, for at least 2 years, we've had consistent staffing issues and we've had turnover. We've hired, one of the points I'll make later is with fidelity when it comes to this policy, and one of the internal things that we're kind of trying to come up to make sure our folks are consistent. We've hired 20% of the police department since this policy has been in effect, and we're only in the 5th quarter with the data. So that's a significant churn. We've had retirements, we have new supervisors in different positions, so we've got a lot of churn, and so yeah, that can factor into it as well. Yep. Stop type trend. So on the left, again, we have just the general category of speed and safety, and then registration, equipment, and other down on the right side. And then going back to Q1 2022, just as percentages of total stops. So basically, we've seen generally speed and safety has been 65 to 75%. We've seen equipment stops have been declining since Q2 2022, and then registration stops are staying roughly around 10% a quarter. Now, if you remember from the traffic stop policy, registration stop is not minor stuff. This is like not having a license plate, stuff like this. This is the policy specifically cuts out a lot of the minor stuff that has been a concern in the past. The question, I think it was Councilmember Posada asked in February, and I'm impressed that I can remember that far back, was about the other. So there's a reason code other for a traffic stop. So I pulled some of the data at the time. So these are the reasons officers stopped a car using other. So we have lane violation, DWLR is driving while license revoked, improper passing, no insurance, no headlights, and failure to yield to a pedestrian. Now, this to me highlights the need for clarification on our own internal decision-making and the way we classify things, right? If you didn't yield to a pedestrian, that's not an other to me, that's a safety. That's a safety concern, right? We're highly dense, bicyclists, pedestrians, and cars all in close proximity. So that is one of the things that we're going to take as a training point, is we need to make sure, again, is it related to the churn? Is it just officers making the best decision? We don't know, but we're going to get that fixed. Citizen complaints for Q4, we had 2, and then Q1 we had, or 2023, we had 4. The not sustained is when someone makes an allegation and there's not facts or circumstances to support that. Policy failure means the officer followed the policy that we had, but still had a problem. There was a result that wasn't what we wanted. Usually that leads to a policy review and a retraining and assessment of the policy. In Q1, we had 3 that were unfounded. Basically, there was no information to support the allegations, and then 1 was proper conduct. Proper conduct is when the officer acted properly, did it properly, and the person filed a complaint, but the officer was correct in their actions. In this case, it had to do with the service of an involuntary commitment order. So that's what this one was. Use of force for quarter 4. We had one incident. The suspect involved there was a blackmail. Circumstances were they had a gentleman under arrest who was impaired, and he became combative. And so the term is hands-on. So they put hands-on to keep him from lashing out, falling, being more aggressive. For quarter 1, we had 9 instances, and you see we have 10 people listed because there were 2 in one instance. In these instances, officers were making a felony arrest with a suspect with firearm history, so the weapons were pointed. Weapon was pointed at a suspect who fled a traffic stop. Weapon was pointed warrant for armed robbery and homicide. Weapon was pointed a jump and run from a vehicle chase. Weapon was pointed when a car drove off and crashed. And then we had someone under arrest who was assaulted, and we had to put hands on to get them back under control. Then we had a fight. We had hands on, had a fight. And then we had a weapon pointed at a breaking and entering suspect with a history of firearms and domestic violence protective order violations. So that's all the details on those. So some of the key takeaways, one, with the focus of the policy, safety-related stops are the priority, specifically explicitly stated. Again, that we wanted to create a policy that was tracked with what we were all trying to do here. Minor registration equipment stops are prohibited unless there is a safety hazard present, right? That was one of the things that I really wanted in there. I don't want the officers to just be trapped by policy and watch something unfold in front of them when they could have intervened. Approximately 50% of traffic stops end with a warning. It was 60% for the quarter 4. Probable cause search rate find is high, so we had 72% and 68%, so there's no fishing. We're not just stopping a lot of cars, getting probable cause, and looking around for stuff, right? These are actual, like, high-quality search. Complaints and use of force are low. And then further policy clarification is needed, right? That other, as an example. So I've got some, that's the end of the presentation. So I have other things to say, but I assume there's questions.
Sure. Thank you so much, Chief. I think one thing that'll be valuable, and we've already received some email comments from Sammy, for example, about just kind of the way the data are presented and how that can be done differently in future reports, that kind of just essentially to make the data, the report more kind of useful to the council as we're thinking about
Not
the
so
policy
thick.
level.
And yes.
So, for example, one of the things we've talked about before, and I think it was Danny and probably others at a previous presentation, was just this idea of monitoring trends and presenting trends. Right? So we have data going back several quarters, as you showed in some of these newer slides. Being able to do that consistently for all the important data points that we're interested in, I think is, for me, what is most important there is monitoring those trends specifically related to the goals that have been established, whether they're policy goals by the council or goals for the department in adopting the new traffic stop policy, that kind of thing. So, for example, you showed in one of your early slides the 2020 resolution, right, where the council at that time said, we want these outcomes: 0 disparities in traffic stops, 0 disparities in use of force, 0 disparities, et cetera, et cetera. Being able to simply say for each of those outcomes what was the trend over time, starting at the date that policy was, that resolution was adopted, I think would be, for me anyway, I'll speak for myself, a useful way of looking at the data. And then of course, you've already started doing some of that with the new traffic stop policy, for example, and monitoring types of searches over time. I think that's really a useful way of looking at it, and will be more informative for the council and for future councils when we think about, are we actually achieving our goals or getting closer to achieving those policy goals? So council members, questions and comments. Danny and Susan.
Yeah, thanks, Damon. And I definitely echo that. I think I really appreciate the steps towards some trend monitoring, and I think basically just taking those policy goals and now doing it bullet by bullet in that same way would be really helpful. So I definitely appreciate that. Definitely commend, to the extent it does reflect the commitment to the traffic policy, the decrease in stops. There's a lot here that I think is really positive and reflects good work. And I think there's a couple places where maybe it's, most likely it's a me thing. Maybe it's a policy clarity thing. and maybe too, there it is a little bit of the classification thing, combination of all three, perhaps. I'm wondering if there's a way to separate out like major license from minor registration. We have sort of the understanding that minor registration stops are prohibited, but there's not really a way in the individual data to to corroborate that. And that what drives me to that idea is the confusion of most of this equipment. I kind of struggle to think about like what a safety issue would be that is not like the nature of the equipment. So like if we're not pulling for brake lights, it seems to me like I don't know what safety issue a brake light outside of the role of a brake light, so not to be pedantic, I guess ideally I would like to see a category that we could get to zero there, or to have a goal of zero to reflect our policy. Right now it's not possible to say definitively that we don't have a pretty significant departure from our goal. And to that end, I guess I'm curious what is the working assumption in the department for that? I mean, so, and one of the things I think this is important is because, it seems like I really appreciate that the bulk of stops are other kinds, but we're talking about like 14% of stops, 70% of which in some demographics lead to citations. That's dozens of citations and sort of high friction touch points for citizens throughout the year. So I guess what's the working assumption right now for how it is that we have these dozens of instances that don't comply with our policy?
Let me rephrase it back to you to make sure I'm understanding you. So
Yeah.
I think one of your questions was, is there some way to delineate between major and minor registration issues?
Minor
like-
registration versus no license plate. Can that be a classification? Probably a change in classification.
So one of the takeaways, and actually I can talk about it right now, was with the policy clarification. The SBI created this form. They created the reasons for stops. There is zero guidance, so it's up to everybody to interpret from an agency perspective, and we don't have a definitive addition for that. So an officer may say, well, wait a minute, is that an equipment issue? Or is it a safety issue? Or could it be a DWI, right? So one of the things that we've now been able to fill our second captain position, and he's the person tasked with the review of this, and also going forward, I want to create some clear decision-making points for the officers, so when they get behind a car, they're like, okay, why am I stopping this car? Am I stopping this car because I would like to write them a citation for not having lights? No, I'm concerned because they have no lights, right? So that's the clarification. What do we stop? We're not stopping to issue a citation. And that, you brought up the brake light. That can be a challenge, right? Because most cars have 3. I was behind a car the other day that had 1. And I'm like, all right, as I'm operating through this policy, is 1 brake light left? Can I say, is that a safety issue? In my head, yes, right? And I want to be clear with that when we go with the officers from the decision-making point. So we can also say, this to us, with 1 light remaining, is a concern. And I don't want to disempower my folks, so we just, so there's that delicate balance. So I think, let me talk to the data person and see. We've also talked about some policy revisions when the officer initiates a traffic stop of explicitly stating on the radio what that stop is for, right? And I think that's one of the things we've bounced around for a little bit and would really clarify what the decision-making is from the officer perspective. So the supervisor hears it and it's clear. So I think that's one of the things going forward that we would like to see. Again, from a consistency and fidelity to the policy, it's important that Officer A and Officer Z see the same thing and roughly, right, as much as humans can all be the same, can get to that same decision point. So those are some internal development decision-making tools that I think would, so we don't have the other being a mishmash of reasons, right? So yes, did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Very substantively, and it wasn't that clear a question, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Danny. Next is Susan.
Yes, good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
We haven't seen you since spring, so I know it was a
I was
busy
supposed to be
summer.
here in June, but I got bumped. They had Elton John came in town or something. I don't know what happened. I want to see him versus me.
But I do know it was a busy summer for you, your officers. I'm very busy back to school as well. So appreciate everything everybody's doing to keep the community safe. The I really appreciate your report, and also the pocket questions were really helpful. And the word that has come up tonight, and word I saw many times in the report was the word balance. And I think the report gave me an appreciation for how hard it is to balance all of these issues around community safety with racial economic disparities that come with traffic enforcement, and maybe a little bit even more challenging here in Carrboro because the safety also deals with so many people who are out on the streets walking and bicycling and trying to keep them safe as well. So it is a lot of balancing. As the mayor said earlier, I guess whenever you're trying to do these kinds of balancing acts, it means collecting this data and continuing to go back and look at the data and tweak, make adjustments. And that brings me to my question, which is, I wonder if it would be easy to go back to the slide. It was on page 29. It was called Trends. And it was what we actually asked about. Yes, that's it right there. Thank you. So you explained very well the total stops by quarter. I was hoping we could look at the bar graphs on the left. And I know, as you said, with the total stops, there are all kinds of things going on here, and it's hard to really tease out, right? But I am looking at the bar graphs on the left. And I know it's just a 3-year trend, but overall, what I'm seeing is in terms of the stop trend, it's going down with the white population, but with the other 3 groups here, Asian, Hispanic, Black, African American, percentage stops is going up. So I was hoping you could share with us a little bit in terms of your takeaway from this, what this would mean in terms of possibly tweaking the policy. Help us out in terms of what stands out here for you.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, we've got this shift here. So the question, I mean, one, when you drop from over 800 to give or take 350 to 400, there's a principle of small numbers. So that means every data point has significantly more impact on the overall number. So that can be a challenge sometimes when you deal with small numbers. One of the things I talked about in the pocket questions was the RTI star analysis, right? And Carrboro, from a traffic stop number, has really been just inside where it's statistically significant to even use the tool. So that can be a real challenge then. Do we up traffic stops to get the right amount to get the data? So that's the challenge. I'm like, and so with this, we've seen a 50% drop in the number of traffic stops, and we've seen specific policy changes to to push away a lot of things. So the question going backward, I'd love to be able to figure out 2 years ago were many of these stops related to minor things that were not explicitly prohibited at the time. So yeah, so I think about this too. I'm like wondering about trends. I'm like, so how do we, and over time it roughly breaks out to about 33% African American for stops, roughly. But obviously, as we look at the trend line going from left to right, there does seem to be an increase. And that's, again, from the policy perspective, one of the things that we are always trying to figure out. One of the discussions we're actually going to have tomorrow is there someone externally who can, one, assess our policy and determine if there's other policy revisions, as well as look at the data? Are there things that, from a policy, from a procedure perspective, that we can enhance to maybe address some of these concerns? And that is in process, and that is one of the things that we look at as well. Mm-hmm. I don't have any solid answers. Right. I have a couple of hypotheses, but I don't know to what they have all influenced those numbers.
Mm-hmm. And it is an example of having this, having trends now and being able to look at that, and I think will be really helpful moving forward and making those decisions. One more question. This one's on the criminal justice debt program. Mm-hmm. So I know we started this program a couple years ago. The program is intended to give people with court fines and penalties some relief. So the hardship is not quite so great. Last year, it sounds like the town gave about $7,000 toward helping people pay off these court fines and penalties. 2 years ago. And then last year, actually, the town gave 0. And then I also looked at Chapel Hill and $20,000 in their budget for this criminal justice debt program. They too used very little of those funds. So both Chapel Hill, Chapel Hill mentions that they are the applications came in much lower than they expected. They want to figure out what do we need to do in terms of public education. Sounds like Carrboro is feeling the same thing. And I did look on the website, so it's great to see that the program is there and it really spells out how folks go about applying for it. What I'm thinking is what would make the most difference if people are learning about this program when they go to pay their court fine or penalty. And so I'm mentioning all of this because I don't mean to get down into the weeds, although it's going to sound like I'm down in the weeds. So I just wanted to throw out an idea I had. I know that we have a social worker coming on board. I just think it would be an interesting project for the social worker in Carrboro, social worker in Chapel Hill, looking at how to make this program, letting folks know about it, putting in place a really simple way for people to get the information they need when they have to pay these fines and penalties, helping them with the application if they need that as well. And I say it all because I know this is a relatively small amount of money, but for a lot of people, this $50 here or this $100 there can take a relatively small fee, and it can, as we both know, easily snowball. So I would love to see all of them. I think this year there's $7,500 for Carrboro. There's $20,000 for Chapel Hill. I would love to see all of this money dispersed to community members who really need it. I do think it's a matter of public education because I just have to believe there's a lot of people out there that this would really, really help them. And so I'll just share this, that take it or leave it, but maybe it would be an interesting project to see if somehow or another that education can get out there so that these funds get spent in a really meaningful way.
So we actually have already started from our side with Kat Zorko's folks on, one, making sure there is a social media presence, two, that we're putting it out there consistently so it's out there more frequently. And as you're talking about the clerk of court, I'm also thinking IFC. So that just bopped off your idea. So yes, the idea is to get the information out there because $100 to you may not be an issue, but for somebody it can be the difference between being able to get out from under a fine and get your car, get all these things. So yes, we want that money spent too. So if there are other ideas, send them our way because the social worker is going to be plugged in wherever we can.
I love the idea of IFC, and I'll just throw out another idea, which with Porch, we have 500 cars do drive through each month to pick up their bags of food. Putting literature into those bags, into the bags of food. I think there's going to be lots of things that, I can share some other ideas, but just really easy ways to get the information out. But also, it makes me wonder if when those fines and penalties are paid, I don't know if that goes through a clerk at the courthouse, or I don't know that process. But if that person could be sharing the information when those fines and penalties get paid, I think that would really help as well.
So Chapel Hill is managing it, so they'll pay it, and then they'll invoice us for it, and we'll reimburse them. So they make the payment to the clerk of court or whoever that government entity that holds that debt.
I got you. I'll share with you a few ideas on getting the word out, and I'll copycat on that as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all you do.
We want to get it spent. Because
I do too.
It's
I
a
love
burden.
to.
It's a burden for people, and it's a problem for folks. So.
Well, I have just talked to some people who, it's because of these $100 penalties. It can just, like I say, snowball to the point you lose your car, and then you can't get to your job, and it can turn into a major crisis. So we'll work together and try and get the word out.
And not to go back into the data, but with roughly 60% written or verbal warnings, there's an effort on our part to educate people like, hey, you can slow down. Hey, you should stop at the red light. Hey, so there's an opportunity to have that as an educational point as well. So it's not just punitive. We don't stop you. Here, get a ticket. Don't do it again. Right? There's an actual hey, and there's an effort on the part of the officers to make it clear that doesn't work, but here's a warning. Let's not do it again. kind of thing. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Chief, one of the things I also had in mind as I was watching you present the report again this quarter, this is not, your department is not the only police department in the country reporting on these kind of outcomes. It's an increasing area of interest, of course. And I'm wondering if, as you talk with the new captain and with your new data analyst, talking with the manager about how to improve and your reporting and make it more consistent and goal-oriented sort of thing, if there's just some best practices looking for in other jurisdictions. I think one that has come up a number of times over the past couple of years, and including in Sammy's email earlier today or yesterday, was the city of Fayetteville, who's been tracking a lot of this information for a long time with goals in mind, right? And looking at trends and that kind of thing. So I just, let's just throw that out there in the interest of kind of thinking about how to improve reporting might be to look for some best practices. There's got to be departments out there who are leading the way on this, and adopting their approach might be worthwhile.
So it was Chief Medlock with Fayetteville in 2013, and that was actually one of the policies we looked at in constructing our policy. And the prediction from the academic side was that it would have zero impact on safety and could have reduced disparities. That was the message from, I'm assuming it was peer-reviewed, report on Fayetteville's. But I don't know their data offhand. So.
Yeah, I think Fayetteville's got many years of experience because of Chief Medlock's work. I think other jurisdictions around the country surely have experience in thinking through carefully how to report on these outcomes in a way that's useful for the department and the agency actually doing the law enforcement, but also for the policymakers who are interested in seeing certain outcomes achieved. And in that vein, I'll just report what I said earlier. I think having the trend data, and I'm glad that you're starting to show some of the trends over multiple quarters, having those tied to specific goals that have been articulated either at the policy level or within your department in terms of the traffic stop policy, for example, tracking that over time, I think is going to be really valuable. Council members, other questions or comments for Chief ATAC? So Randy and then Sammy.
Yeah, my question is not about the report specific to equity, but it is, I'm wondering if you're looking at trends having to do with probable cause and the relationship between drugs and weapons, and whether or not Carrboro, there's been an escalation over time as to whether or not Carrboro is like a corridor for more activity.
So I will tell you from 2021, most of our violent crime was committed by people not from here, on people not from here, who were engaged in either individual interpersonal beef or in selling narcotics. That's most of what drives our violent crime, not domestics aside, right? That's interpersonal. But from the 2021 where we were a series of shooting, those were the main trends. We also had some road rage incidents, but yes, traditionally that is going to be in aggregate what you're going to see.
So, but are you seeing, I mean, I would love to see a trend line to see what that looks like over this same course of time, because it occurs to me that there's a lot of activity that is not Carrboro-centric, but occurs within our municipality. And I would just like to have a better feel for that. And because of SORAD and some of the other, the advent of a social worker, I'd like to have us be thinking proactively rather than reactively, especially if we find that, the beltway around Carrboro is a corridor. So, thank you.
Sammy?
Thanks, Chief. I sent that email earlier, and I realized that you had provided the hit rate, so I appreciate that, and sorry for having missed it in your presentation. The other request I had would be solved simply by putting a line on Q1 2022 just to show
Delineate when the policy came
Right.
in.
To kind of flag like, oh, there's something else that has a big effect on
Yes. Milestone.
And could you show the slide on search quarter for 2022, please? Just so I can understand fully, that percentage you mentioned is accomplished by dividing probable cause by incident to arrest.
Hang on. Let me pull up the slide because I have some underneath it. You're talking the search found rate on probable cause
Yeah,
searches?
the one that
Okay.
defines phishing.
Let me clarify with the analyst, so I'm not trying to give you an answer right now. Let me find that out and give you the right answer, but my assumption is it's going to be total number of searches by the items found. But again, sometimes we have searches that have multiple items found, and sometimes we have searches with nothing.
Yeah.
Let me clarify on how that is calculated so that with the analyst.
Okay. Or it could be incident to arrest. I mean, it seems like just the infraction, irrespective of how many.
So incident to arrest generally do not turn up a lot of contraband.
Oh, okay.
Generally. They sometimes periodically there's residual whatevers, but for the most part, where you generally do your find rate is going to be in your probable cause searches.
Okay. So I still wonder, I see a disparity there. I'm trying to understand it because I see both Hispanic and Caucasian have probable cause that is much lower than the incident to arrest, whereas it feels like there are more probable causes happening, but fewer incidents to arrest. For
So with
African-
13, let me do this, and I can't do it immediately, but I can dig into, because the numbers are so small,
Yeah,
we
I
can
know that.
actually pull, like I did with the use of force. It's like we can actually, this is the reality
Right.
that I can't do it now, I can't do it tomorrow, but I can
Yeah.
get looking on it and get it.
Yeah, I
to where
appreciate your detail on
we're trying to
on
figure
those
out A,
other
how
ones.
it's calculated, and B,
But there is a trend where both in search quarter 4 and search quarter 1, 2023, there's still this disparity, not as drastic as is in quarter 4, but I think there's something to be said about, even though the numbers are low, there's something there. I totally agree with the importance of assessing whether we're meeting our goals. That Damon has been, Mayor Sales, I never say Mayor.
Damon's good.
Damon. I don't know, I'm trying to be so formal all of a sudden. And I think like just, check mark on whether we're accomplishing them or not would go a long way. Could you show us that original slide you had? And I think that it's essential also to understand how to determine, I know it's hard, assess what the driver demographics are. And so we could achieve point number 1 depending on which kind of baseline we choose. And I'm very concerned about the one that was presented in this latest presentation, which was all about crashes. And there are studies that show that there are disparities in how that happens, and that African Americans, for whatever reason, tend to be in more crashes. There's even one that shows that there are more people, African Americans, that die in crashes, but that could be related to responses by hospital and ambulances and all kinds of other factors too. My point being that it's very important for this council to get that straight and let you know which one we want to go by. And I very much favor the one we had before, which accounts for all traffic and where those people come from and what the demographic makeup is of those locations, and then aggregating it. And it kind of more tracks with our own demographics, and that kind of makes sense because we live in a region, and the region kind of similar to demographically. Whereas the crash one is an outlier if you compare it to the triangle demographics. So I don't trust it as much. And it paints a better picture in terms of our reaching our goals. And I don't think that's what we want to, that's not the way we want to achieve our policy goals by choosing the most favorable baseline. The other thing, in reading the Fayetteville report, I thought it very interesting that they used geolocation data for both traffic stops and crashes. I know it's not required by the state, but if that's something we could do too, I think it would be very helpful to inform our understanding of what the actual need is for enforcement of safety measures. If there are incidences that are happening at specific locations, it seems like those are the places where those kinds of enforcements would more likely be needing to happen, which is what Fayetteville did, and deprioritize it elsewhere. And that gets to this other point, they made in the Fayetteville report is that oftentimes, enforcement isn't the only way to solve these issues. That we're talking about design, the ways of having road design that could decrease this, and that translates into investments by the council, like how do we want to allocate and how do we want to solve these safety issues. So I very much encourage everyone to read the Fayetteville report, because there's a really valuable discussion where they really get into this idea of how do you weigh, well, firstly, what is the goal? How do you measure where we're at relative to that goal? And is what we're doing achieving something? Because I think we were kind of like on autopilot in terms of like what we expect and what we understand policing and public safety to mean. And there's an opportunity, and there's a big movement to change that way of thinking. So hopefully some of that will come out with the Community Safety Task Force, which is we're gonna have that report coming up soon, and there's work to be done there. Anyway, so those are my first impressions. I appreciate this ongoing work. I think it's very important for the council and the community to understand what we're doing, the accountability component with your department, as we do with every other department. I get another question is arrest for low-level marijuana-related offenses. Were there any?
So one of the quarters, there were two. That's the one I discussed. There was the illegal gun and the marijuana, and then there was I believe it was a domestic violence arrest and the marijuana. Let me see. That was
Do those get qualified as marijuana arrests, or because they were really higher charge crimes?
Yeah. So that's 99.9% of the time. If there is a charge, you're going to see it attached to a more severe charge.
In a way, for that quarter, you could say, Sammy, that the goal was achieved, right? I mean, in a sense, right? If the goal was 0 arrests for low-level marijuana-related offenses.
Well, I guess the question is, did the court weigh the I mean, like, did it show up as like a charge?
It shows up as a misdemeanor charge.
Yeah. So I think my point is we haven't met our goal, and I would like for that to be improved.
I'm not seeing any in quarter 1, 2023. It's not written here. We did or we didn't, but I'm assuming that there's not a data point. It's 0, but we can verify that.
I guess the other opportunity is also to track the court. Like one thing to see how it's happening in the arrests and the stops, but like how are we tracking in terms of like the burden represented by the actual people who are paying fines in court? So if we can have data that tracks that.
Yeah, to know what is the outcome of those charges.
So I can tell you, I have specifically tried to get that data, and I'm always met with, we don't track that.
Okay.
It's like, can you track Carrboro specific citations and tell me the outcomes? And I always get back, no.
And who is that?
That would be the clerk of court.
Okay,
so there may be some possible way that we can pull it, because I have to believe if you take 10 citations for safety issues, that there's going to be a variance of dismissals, reductions, and PJCs, or prayer for judgment continues.
Right.
There's going to be the spectrum of that. So yes, I've wondered about that too.
I mean, we don't even need the details of what the outcomes were. The fact of them needing to present themselves is where
that goes to the criminal justice debt stuff too, right? So who's being saddled with court fines? Why is the outcome in the court different for various and sundry folks? So
Right.
yeah.
So it sounds like we need to get up with the clerk of court and help
Learn more.
help get that.
Because I'd be
information.
curious about that data too.
Yeah.
So, but I've tried to find it. But
Yeah, and I mean, again, getting back to breaking out of silos, and safety is beyond just what you all do, and there's many opportunities, and I feel like we're receptive to that and working towards it, and look forward to future councils cracking that nut. So thank you,
Same.
Chief.
So, Chief, just want to summarize kind of what I've heard from some of the questions and comments here today. One is just the continued interest in the trend reporting that you're now doing, which I think is really important, especially tying those trend data to goals, the specific outcomes we're looking for, so we can see over time how we're getting closer toward achieving those goals. Clarification, this came from one of Sammy's comments, clarification about how the hit rate is calculated for probable cause searches. Sammy also had a question on the apparent disparity between probable cause searches and incident to arrest searches, the racial disparity, what the reason might be for that. This bigger question that comes up really every time is what's the denominator for traffic and how disparities are being calculated, right? In some reports, as Sammy mentioned, it's been tying it to the origin of the person who cited that thing. And this one, it's more using traffic crash data. Like that would be an example where I'd be interested in seeing what are other jurisdictions doing? What's the best practice for establishing what the appropriate denominator is? Finally, Susan mentioned just trying to do better about getting the word out about criminal justice debt relief program so that money is getting out the door. One more, Sammy mentioned an interest in, if possible, using geolocation data for incidents. Is there a motion? Oh, we have more? Okay, Eleazar?
Chief, I just want to say thank you for being responsive to this council and for answering the questions we had. And I actually just wanted to move to accept the report.
Excellent. For a second? Seconded. Moved by Eleazar, seconded by Danny to
And
accept this report.
Can we make that with the summary that the mayor just made?
Friendly amendment to your motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Including the comments that I just summarized. Any further questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Chief, thanks very much.
Good to see everybody.
Have a great
Thank you,
evening.
Thank you.
Right along. Madam Manager, next item, please.
Thank you. Item 2 is a resolution supporting Orange County contract for community engagement consultant services for development of a master plan for the Green Track. The purpose of this agenda item is to request that Town Council consider adopting a resolution of support for Orange County to proceed with community engagement consultant services for development of the Green Track Master Plan. Trish McGuire, our planning director, will provide a brief overview of this item.
Thanks, Marie. So we'll hear from Trish about what this resolution is all about. I do want to note that we do have one speaker on this item as well from the public. And Trish may mention this in her presentation, but I just also want to note that this matter went before the Chapel Hill Town Council last week and was approved, I believe, unanimously by the council. And so it will, after we've decided what way to go with this resolution, we'll go to the Orange County Board of Commissioners for their consideration.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Good evening, everyone. Yes, so I'm going to give you a little bit of background, an outline of the consultant services, the schedule we're looking at, and then just briefly describe the resolution that's in the packet tonight. So the Green Tract is a piece of property that's located over adjacent to the railroad tracks between Eubanks Road and Homestead Road. It's about 167 acres of land, and the Orange County, Chapel Hill, and Carrboro all jointly purchased it in 1984. It was being considered at that time as a site for expansion of the landfill. And subsequent to the purchase, the decision-making process was originally to make the decision for that not to occur. And then subsequent, years later, for the landfill not to expand in that location, and then for the landfill to close. So in any case, that's a very short summary. There is a lengthy timeline associated with this property that is available at the website that's linked here and in the agenda packet as well. But in 2000, the property was separated into two parts, and about 60 acres of it was transferred to Orange County. Orange County purchased it using their enterprise funds from the solid waste enterprise fund, and it was purchased for non-landfill purposes. And the remaining property stayed about 107 acres. And in some of the materials, you'll see the acreage is like 164 and 104, breaking it down slightly differently. But when we did the surveys recently, we found that the numbers are actually 167 acres. So those are the numbers I'll use in this presentation. But anyway, the 107 acres were held in joint ownership, and the decision was made by the local governments working together to consider determining a specific kind of future use for the property. And there was a resolution adopted in 2002, and then a number of actions we all undertook over a series of years, not all in direct succession. And Minister Campbell can speak to that perhaps, and many of you are familiar with that as well. But in 2016, the decision was made to for Orange County to actually decide to designate the 60 acres of their portion as a headwaters preserve, and then as part of other activities ramping up for all of us, to all the local governments to work together to make some more specific decisions about the green tract. So the map at the right shows the result of the most recent action kind of on the tracks themselves, which was a recombination of the properties. And the headwaters preserve, the Orange County portion is this shown in the lighter purplish pink color here in the middle, and then the darker purple colored property sections are the 107 acres still owned jointly by Orange County, Chapel Hill, and Carrboro. So one of the steps, in addition to this recombination, was to decide on a master plan process, and so we've been working on adopting a resolution and an interlocal agreement in reverse order there on how those steps, how a master planning process should go forward. This year, we the local government staff worked together every week, actually, to support the managers, mayor, and chair group, but to keep advancing the interests of the community with regard to the Rogers Road area, as well as specifically the Green Tract. And so a request for proposals was released in June of this year. A preferred consultant team has been identified. This is we've got two RFP processes basically that have been going forward. Initially, they were combined into one, but were separated to really allow a consultant team that could help us help us really advance the interests of making One Orange, the racial equity framework we have, jointly adopted here in Orange County, integrate that into and have it be the basis for the community engagement for this master planning process. The RFP was released by Orange County, and the contract will be with Orange County. The county staff are interacting with the consultant who's been identified as the preferred consultant here. The cost share is as it has been for many years, and as is spelled out in the interlocal agreement: 43% for Chapel Hill, 43% for Orange County, and 14% for Carrboro. The current maximum cost identified for the work for the community engagement services is $360,000. $50,000 of that is identified for community stipends. This is really part of the intention of making this an equity-centered community engagement process along our lines of basing this on One Orange. Carrboro's share of the total project cost at that maximum is $50,400. There is exploration of modifying the scope somewhat to lower the costs for the project. As I mentioned, there is a related but separate procurement process for the design work, the master development of the master plan. Chapel Hill, as the mayor mentioned, did approve a resolution in support of Orange County moving forward with the community engagement. They approved that last week. There was some discussion about both the cost and the schedule for the project during the Chapel Hill Town Council's adoption or consideration of the resolution, but they did move forward with approving it. Orange County, the Board of County Commissioners, are scheduled next week to have a work session to be considering the contracting services for the work, and subsequently, the week following, on the 17th, they're scheduled to consider acting on the contracts, so to authorize them. If we proceed as on the sort of schedule we're talking about here with these actions being approved, the project would begin this year, and it's expected to conclude at the end of next year, so it would carry through December of 2024.
Just to clarify that point, because I think it's important that that's the total schedule for both phases.
That's correct.
Of master planning, so this community engagement part is the first part, but then the actual proper master planning part comes next, and that's the full 15 months. It's going out to the end of 2024. So that's just right. So folks know, it's not just the community engagement part that's going to take.
No, that's right. We don't have to wait to begin the design process until then. No, that's correct.
I think there was it's unclear when Chapel Hill was first picking this up last week about what that timeline was, and it includes everything, not just the engagement.
That's correct.
How does that work? That they don't have to be sequential. Like community input, I would think would inform kind of like what the design is. But you're saying that they can happen simultaneous?
Well, the community engagement would start first. There would be, there'd be information that begins to be gathered to inform the design team, but the design team is also going to be looking at details about the property, specific information about the site, exactly, natural features, et cetera. Yep. And there will be, then the expectation is that the community engagement would end, I don't have the timeline memorized, but it will end several months before the master planning process would be ready to wrap up. But they can, there is a point during which they are happening together.
That's related to that, since we're going to be approving of this other contract, when is that approval going to be?
I don't
before us?
have that scheduled just yet, but I was asking Marty that question earlier today, and we'll have a staff meeting on Thursday, so I'll find out for sure then. Yep. The resolution we have in front of you does reference the interlocal agreement, which was approved in 2021, and that agreement does spell out some things about the current and future use of the green tract, and these uses do in part derive from a number of community conversations, but the Mapping Our Community's Future work that was done in 2015 and 2016 in the Rogers Road community. There are details about how we should consider moving forward with development for the property, and then those financial responsibilities for each of the parties. And essentially, it does support, express support for the Board of County Commissioners going forward with contracting for these services. Happy to try and answer any questions.
So as I mentioned, we do have one member of the public here to speak. We want to go with Reverend Campbell before we proceed. Okay.
Yes.
Trish, thank you so much for your
You bet. Thank
We
you.
have some additional questions, although we'll see. Reverend Robert Campbell, welcome. Mr. Campbell, you know how I set a timer, and I'm going to do that again, so it's going to be that 3 minutes,
We got
and
a
then,
running
the very
calendar.
loud alarm will sound.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Councilman and town staff. I come to support moving forward with the consultant contract by the Orange County Commissioners, simply because it is going to be very important to understand how mapping our future works within the overall plan. We know that in the past we have went through similar in and outs. And so where the community engagement will become important is that we'll bring everybody to the table so that when things get ready to move forward, we can't hear, oh, I didn't know about this. And so that's why it's important that the consultant can bring everybody to the table after having a conversation prior to bringing everybody to the table, have a conversation with the resident that is around the green tract and that butts next to the green tract, so that all the voices will be heard, so there will be no naysayers. It is important that we move forward because how long have it been that we've been discussing this property for something that would benefit mixed income housing? Even the concept of mapping our future will change because the development of homestead kind of changed the background of what those units would look like. And so there's a lot of conversation that need to be done about that, along with the community members that will be affected by this. And so I encourage you to move forward, and so that when we began this conversation, that everything started moving and continue to move. I know at one time they were talking about 18 months, but once we start the community engagement, it should move forward because you already had so many discussions about what can be developed. We have determined where these partial lands are. We know what have been reserved. And so we still got to deal with how we get into it and how do we get out. regress and regress. How do we do this? And so knowing that there's going to be some discussion about where the roads are and how the roads meet and connect the whole community, but all that will come in that community engagement. And then one of the things that most people need to know is that they might need to walk on the property itself so they can see and know what we're talking about. Because I don't want it to come up again that, oh, we need to preserve those 2,000 hardwood trees. You won't find none out there. You won't find 2,000. And so people need to understand that those trees does not exist out there, and those trees that are being preserved, that have already been recognized and pointed out. And so community engagement means that not only the ones that live in and around Homestead, Eubanks, Rogers Road, Billabong, and all those areas, but people that will come as far as Bellamont, Southern Village,
Carrboro.
and so and Carrboro. And so there's a lot of things that we could point out, even when we talk about Greenway, the headwaters coming off the Green Track, running underneath Rogers Road and around Hogan Farm and underneath Homestead and onto Bowling Creek. There's a lot of conversation. How do we preserve that? How do we beautify the waterway that leads off in the Rogers Road community? And so it's very important that we support and move forward. And I think Carrboro, most of all, understand what all this means. It means that firefighters, teachers' assistants, teachers, those who work in our sanitation department, landscaping, work at UNC, will have somewhere where they can stay and don't have to drive 45 minutes to get to work. All these things is being offered on the Green Track in combination with the development of St. Paul. And so it's a collaboration to move all this forward.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for this opportunity.
You've got the vision right down, and we're right there with you, I think. So
Thank you.
appreciate you being here to remind us of why this is so important.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again. All right, council members, any questions for Trish about the resolution in our packet?
Nope.
Amy?
Yeah, I just have, I don't know if it's for Trish. Well, yeah, it is for you, Trish. So one of the reasons that Carrboro's invested in this property that isn't in Carrboro is because this is a legacy of the dump. We jointly own this property because it was projected to be part of a landfill. And by consequence, we are also responsible to the immediate community from the impacts of the landfill. And I'm glad we're recognized as still remembering that. And I think that's the value of our continued participation with Orange County and Chapel Hill. Like, we need to make sure that this is an equity space. But having said all that, there is a point at which I feel Carrboro will want to jump off that train once those goals are accomplished. And I'm wondering to what degree the plan might be able to incorporate such a plan for us, given that we are investing. Is there a way in which, like, I don't know, I mean, I imagine there will be proposals for selling a nonprofit, I don't know what it'll look like, but I can imagine that we would want information on how we could sell our portion of this property. And I just want to put that out there. I know it's not necessarily part of what we're signing off on today, which is the public input portion, but for the planning portion, I think that is a big question that we need to have our say in.
I think that's a good point, Sam, and I think that the outcome of that master planning process will help answer that question for the town about how exactly will it be developed, what entities are involved in the development, nonprofit housing agencies, others. That's going to answer. We're going to need to know that before we can answer the question of what's Carrboro's continued role beyond the point of development.
Yeah, and I think for us, it's also what's our threshold for feeling comfortable enough that this is on the right track, that we can leave Chapel Hill and Orange County
in our duty. That's right.
To do the rest,
I will also just mention again, as I did when I mentioned that Chapel Hill Town Council had approved this resolution last week, there were comments from council members in that discussion about the length of time that this overall master planning process is going to take, some interest in seeing whether that can be accelerated. So Trish, I appreciated you noting that there is conversation happening at the staff level about opportunities for reducing the scope of work, help accelerate this planning process. So, and I will certainly communicate that sentiment to the mayors and the chair about the green track. Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Trish, for the presentation. Reverend Campbell, thank you so much for your comments this evening. I had just a few questions. Yes, I wanted to also mention I would love to see this whole process expedited so it could be even faster than December 2024. There was mention in an email about add-ons, and I would just suggest that, $360,000, it's a lot of money. And if there's any way that this, some of these add-ons could be cut from this project, I like having the stipends there because maybe that will help with sort of broader participation, but it does seem like an awful lot of money on this community engagement. The other thing that would be really important for me, and I assume it's part of the engagement, is the mapping our community's future. It seems like that whole engagement will be centered around that plan. And so that might be my hope in this engagement, is that centers all of the conversation. Couple of other things. Reverend Campbell mentioned St. Paul Village, and will that be a part of the engagement as well in terms of the connectivity between the green track and the future St. Paul Village? When in terms of in terms of this whole idea of engagement, does it go even beyond the green track in terms of its connectivity to the broader area?
I mean, I think what is planned to happen at St. Paul's Village is certainly part of the context that needs to be considered for how the green tract plan develops. So, I mean, I know that it's an interest of the community, as Mr. Campbell mentioned, the work on Homestead, the projects that have gone forward on Homestead Road, which have changed the context for people thinking about the Rogers Road community to some degree. So, the point, I don't think I can say that they're interrelated and there's community engagement that will be done about St. Paul's Village as part of the Green Tract. But I'd like to reserve that to say I really need to check with my team. The rest of the Orange County Chapel Hill staff, we're all working together on this. Right. But not to my knowledge, but I do know that it is absolutely part of the context.
Yeah.
And
yes.
the status of it, the schedule of it, that kind of thing, those are all things that we'll want to be able to share with the community as they're talking about what happens on the green track.
Okay. Couple other things. I'm kind of a little all over the map. I apologize. I did want to go back to the add-ons. I can't remember. I think it was the county saying that maybe there was a possibility that staff could devote a little bit of time with this, saving some of the consulting fees. I have no idea. We have a tiny staff. I have no idea, but I was just going to see if there was interest in terms of our staff doing some of the work to reduce the consultant fee, our portion of it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And finally, the town's portion of the community engagement was $50,400. And has it been determined how much the town will be paying for the master plan portion of the consultant?
I don't have the scope is under development.
Okay. So. And will all of these fees be paid using ARPA funds, or what is the funding source here?
It has not been identified. Okay. ARPA has not been
identified yet. Okay.
When we were talking about the some of the work related to the Green Tract last year, I don't think we were referring to ARPA at all.
Okay. And then this is just final clarification. So I know that council approved $1 million in affordable housing using ARPA funds. And that $1 million is the idea that it would go toward the development of this affordable housing in the Green Tract?
No, we put out a call for
Or call for proposals on that.
proposals for the use of those funds.
So that's totally separate from the Green
That is
Tract?
separate.
2026.
Okay, got you. Okay, thank you. I think that's all I've got. Appreciate it.
So Susan,
You're
I think
welcome.
again, those kind of comments about opportunities, to draw down the scope a little bit, tighten up the budget. That 350, the maximum amount here is a maximum.
Oh, the
These
360
options.
is
So there's
maximum.
conversation that the staff will be able to have about whether that narrowed somewhat and potentially the timeline accelerated as a result.
Yeah, and with the consultant who's been identified as the preferred here. And, I mean, the staff does have a role already, even within the scope that's defined at that maximum. I mean, there are tasks that the local governments would be carrying out in relation to the way we engage, the way we do mailings and things like that. So there are costs and local
And I didn't mean
expenses.
just for staff to gulp when I said that. It was
No, I
more just,
understand.
if the interest and if there was any bandwidth there, it was more in that spirit of things.
Well, yes, and we always have lots of interest,
Yeah.
but we do have some pretty limited
Yeah.
bandwidth. But but there is a role for staff in any case, for sure.
I had hands from Eleazar and Danny. I would certainly appreciate a motion if one is forthcoming, but Eleazar, you're next.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, my question was answered, and I just want to clarify just so that I'm completely clear on this. By approving this resolution, we're basically saying we're putting up to $50,400 into this motion, but the staff's already be working to make that money or make that amount go down and the timeline go down, right?
It is supporting that. I think it is. It doesn't specifically say that, I don't think, in this resolution.
It doesn't, but I just wanted to make sure.
It would be supporting that.
Yeah, no, for
As
sure.
the cost share under the interlocal agreement. Yep.
For sure. All right, with that, I know that Councilman Brunel is next, but I did want to move to approve.
Second.
I was going to move.
That was your comment?
Yep.
And moved by Eleazar, seconded by Barbara to approve the resolution in the packet. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The matter passes unanimously.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell, thank you again for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you in Town Hall. Trish, thank you so much for keeping this moving. I know it's, as Trish said, the staffs from the three jurisdictions are meeting every week about the Green Tract to make sure that our decision in 2021 on the resolution is being followed. So appreciate all the work that you're doing. Trish.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you, Trish.
All right, any matters by council members before we adjourn? Sammy?
Yeah, just quick question for staff when you all get a chance. I was heard the lighting for the library, the 203 at night. There's lights on, and the question of whether they can just be turned off in line with our climate goals.
So, Madam Manager, for some reason, it's been the last like 10 days or so, the lights at the 203 project have been on, like all night long, really bright, and I'm not sure why that started. So maybe just it's understanding why that is.
If possible, if we could just turn them off.
Sure, we'll follow up with them.
They were off before. Thanks for bringing that, Sammy.
Thanks.
Right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Eleazar, seconded by Sammy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Good night.
Thank you, Madam